All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here for podcast number 40. Wow.
For this one, we're going to be talking about
Antiheroes. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
The
You know them.
edgelords.
You love them. They are the edgiest of edgelords and the most bland of characters, dime a dozen, all over the place.
But also so amazing when done right.
Right, so we're going to be going into not only like why we like antiheroes, like why we as a community like antiheroes, some early classic examples of them.
Where they've come since then.
Yeah, like what anime in particular has done with them. And then when we get into a specific thing that we think makes a good antihero, like a really well done antihero, something that you have to have in that one. Before we do that, though, gotta shout out one of our VIP patrons. Right. Yeah. Yes, Jisoo, thank you so much for your support. Very recent VIP supporter, just joined that whole tier. Yeah, I think it was last month. And yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate it so much.
Yes,
it means a lot. All right, so
definition time.
Yeah, definition time.
Because when me and Caleb were talking about this, we were like, wait a minute. But what is an antihero? Like, we were talking about different characters, and we're like, but is that actually an antihero, or is this? So we looked up the actual definition, and it turns out it's actually very general.
Very general. It encompasses a large amount of characters, and it's kind of
self-explanatory.
It's kind of self-explanatory, but it also feels a little bit disheartening because then you go, wait a minute. Like, 50% of characters in, say, anime, for instance, are antiheroes.
Or even more.
Yeah.
So the definition is a core character, usually a protagonist, who lacks conventional heroic attributes.
Right.
So, I mean, it's quite literally the non-hero, type character.
But a lot of them tend to be protagonists, and this is a great thing to bring up. We're going to particularly talk about protagonists in this case that have what we are calling Antihero Qualities.
Yeah, it's not like a binary thing of are they an antihero or are they not.
Exactly.
But it's rather a contradiction.
Yeah.
Where you have usually the protagonist, or who should be the hero, right, who does some unhero-like things.
Right.
But the point is that it's not all the time. It's not something where they always have to do the thing that's not the hero thing.
Right.
Because then that goes into villain protagonist territory.
And not only that, you get into the one shade, one note, 2-bit, essentially, anti-hero that is basically just a try-hard copy of some edgy character that is well-loved by the anime community.
Yep.
With no real effort put into it.
Right. It's the idea that... like, okay, think about every generic, like, revenge story.
Yeah,
right?
There you go.
The reason those probably became popular is because it's like, hey, it's an anti-hero for the main character, and anti-heroes can be really interesting.
They can,
But when you can't remember their names, you know, and you're just like, oh, yeah, the general anti-hero tryhards, you know.
Yeah.
That's
They took my
awesome.
daughter. They killed my dog.
Right.
Oh, wait, hold on. John Wick was actually pretty good.
Well, because it was self-referential about it, too.
Yeah, that's true. So we're going to go into kind of why we even like anti-heroes. One of the things that's primarily a big thing in anti-heroes, from the earliest anti-heroes to the ones coming out today, is that they have something to say. They're not just a character that is there to be different from the protagonist, the lawful stupid protagonist, as we like to call them. And you can't just say, like, oh, they're in the chaotic morality alignment on D&D. They're an anti-hero. Woohoo. No. In a lot of ways, if we took the definition in its broad, encompassing way, there's a very high likelihood that they would be an anti-hero. But one of the things that you really need to get into the core of your anti-hero character is that they have some kind of commentary. Now,
right. It's like the whole phrase, like, or term of edgy, right? I would say actually came from anti-heroes that were done badly.
Sure.
Because it felt like they were trying too hard. One of the things about anti-heroes is that by their very nature, by the very name anti-hero, the idea is that they do something other than the norm. Something other than what is expected.
Yeah.
But when they end up being basically categorized as being an anti-hero, it becomes exactly what you expect, because you know almost like to a T the kind of caricature they are.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of all they do.
So
it can get very frustrating.
Yeah, it can get pretty aggravating when a character has those moments of being a hero, but they also have that other aspect of them that kind of keeps you on edge, quote unquote,
exactly.
so that you're not sure exactly what they're going to do. It gives them an air of unpredictability, and then you go, wait, this character, I'm starting to like them a little bit more. They are not the exact same as every other protagonist I've seen. So what I think the reason why anti-heroes are so popular is that we've gone through a lot of media. Just whoever you are watching this, you've probably consumed a decent amount of media, and you've seen all the different shades of protagonists out there, and you go, I'm getting kind of bored of protagonists. I want to shift over into the side characters, which are, you know, they have a little bit more interesting quirks about them, and they're usually given less time, so you have less opportunities to not like them.
And usually they have a bit more freedom within the plot of the story, because they don't have to actually have the burden of driving the plot, right? So they can do all kinds of other stuff. They can antagonize the hero, but then be their best friend or their ally, you know, the next time you see them. And those kinds of things are what make these characters way more interesting, because we like characters that aren't just like on rails, right? We like the ones that basically have their own personality that they bring to the table. And with anti-heroes, they are usually, when done well, actively doing that, even if it is in contrast with, say, the loss of society, or if it's, you know, that side character, the main protagonist, that's that lawful stupid,
but
whatever.
But the main protagonist can also be the anti-hero. The main protagonist, essentially, when they are made as the anti-hero, oftentimes there is a specific theme in the story that is being carried by this character not having the conventional heroic attributes. So that's kind of the general foundation of, I'd say, why we really enjoy having those types of characters. And we're going to go into a couple examples here of really well-known, but maybe a little bit older, depending on your generation, of anti-hero examples.
And so when you think about, like, when we mention these, if they were to come out today, you probably wouldn't even consider them to be anti-heroes, because that's just par for the course now. That's why the whole super edgelord edginess
is kind of a problem right now. So one of my favorite examples of this, very classic story, retold and retold and retold over and over and over again, is you go back to the original book by Alexander Dumas in The Count of Monte Cristo. The Count of Monte Cristo is a classic revenge tale. It has a lot of edgy elements to its main character, but when you get into the book, now I'm telling you guys, the movies, not the movie. I've heard even there's an anime out there that actually might be really interesting for us to get into. That could
be really cool.
But if you look at the book, the character is wrapped in mystery, is wrapped in these contradictions of elements where they'll do things that you go, whoa, wait, is this the good guy still?
Exactly.
Okay, no, okay, they're doing this thing. Okay, that's good. But there's a duplicity in the Count of Monte Cristo because of the way the plot is situated. I won't go into too many spoilers if you don't know too much about it. But you're never also quite sure who you're talking to, literally. And in those moments where you realize, wait, is this the Count of Monte Cristo, or is this the Count of Monte Cristo? It's almost playing in a meta way the whole aspect of whether or not he's currently the protagonist with the hero doing the thing to bring about justice, or is he an edgy edgelord moving to this area there? And that contradiction brings about this air of mystery and almost charisma to the Count's character. That's
absolutely
very hard to find in other protagonists.
And that's ultimately why we like these characters so much, because they have that, like you said, charisma to them. It just
that personality, that magnetic, just whoa. They have something.
Even if we find ourselves being like, I don't know, they're doing some stuff I can't quite agree with, because they do it with such conviction.
For sure.
You still end up being like, oh, but I hate to love them.
Like it's the aspect of where the typical lawful stupid protagonist will have the conviction of doing the right thing. But when you have someone who has that same conviction about doing something that's in the shades of gray area, you're like, wait a minute. Can these two things exist in the same world? And if it's written well, you see, oh, yes, they can.
Oh, yeah.
So what's one of your favorite examples?
One of my favorite examples is, okay, now you're going to be like, oh, that's so lame and generic. Han Solo.
Oh, no, that's not maybe generic.
Han
That's
Solo,
classic.
Now, here's the thing. Han Solo in A New Hope, with the Han shooting not first, but being the only one who shot. Because the whole idea there, and in the later movies, he becomes more of just the hero, right?
Yeah.
That is just the hero, alongside Luke Skywalker. But in the beginning, it's very much this thing of like, you don't know what side this guy's on. Okay, he's with them for a little bit because they offer to pay him, but is he going to betray them at like a moment's notice? Is he just gonna like turn tail and run? And then of course he comes back at the end. Spoilers if you haven't seen Star Wars. And it's awesome, right? They throw this development in there, but they throw lots of contradictions in there too. He's not just, some smuggler. He also has that heart of gold and stuff. And because this was done so well, since then there have been so many Han Solo clones. Some doing it better, some doing it worse.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, him being set as an example here in the video is perfect because a lot of the characters we'll bring up later show how the Han Solo archetype, if you will, has evolved.
Right,
to even greater heights since then.
Because nowadays people probably wouldn't even think twice if someone, shot somebody under the table, right? They'd just be like, "Oh, okay, that was kind of cool, whatever."
Yeah, whatever.
But that wouldn't give them any idea of like, "Oh, the moral standing of this person is a little bit off.
Right.
We should watch them."
Yeah. So where has anime taken these kind of aspects of the anti-hero qualities to infinity and beyond, all over the spectrum? They have made a gamut of anti-heroes to choose from. It's almost like burdening to just think about how many there are.
It's one of those things where because there's so many of them, they almost lose their meaning.
Yes.
Because when every anime protagonist is competing for the most unique design contest, it's
when everyone's edgy, no one is.
Exactly. Right. And then the subtle things like Han shooting someone under a table and, wondering whether or not he's going to be your friend, a little bit down the road in the story, gets lost. Which is unfortunate. But there are a lot of really good anti-heroes in anime.
Yeah, some of our favorite ones tend to be a lot along the lines of the Han Solo archetype, like Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop, one of the greatest anime out there, is a great example of where you'd go, wait a minute, that's not really an anti-hero. He's a really good guy. He is a... Wait a minute, have you seen all the contradictory, non-heroic things this guy does?
And that's one of the things that's so amazing, because he'll do the things like beat somebody to a pulp, that he's going to like hunt down or whatever, but then he'll also do something that is like unbelievably self-sacrificial and like help somebody out that he doesn't know at all, when if he just like, say, stole something from them, that would set him up for life or whatever. Right. But he doesn't do it.
And on the other end of the spectrum, we have someone who you really don't want to be like partnered with in Hisoka from Hunter x Hunter, where you're like, wait, this guy's an anti-hero? Like,
isn't he more of a villain?
Is he more of an antagonist? Yeah, it's like, well, actually, no. He has a full gamut of moments of being the protagonist, the pseudo-antagonist, kind of just another side character there. But he has moments of doing the, semi-heroic things, doing the helpful things for the protagonist, allying up here and there. But then also moments where you're like, okay, no, this is not a good guy. So the anti-hero's character can be a whole, like a whole mess of things. But when it comes down to it, an anti-hero is a very central character to the plot, a core character, a protagonist even, who lacks those conventional heroic attributes.
Right.
Now, the thing is that we have taken that definition loosely to say that you can lack some. You don't necessarily have to lack all of them.
That's what usually happens with the bad ones. They make it so it's like, oh, they have none of them.
They have no redeeming qualities whatsoever.
Or they have them do one thing that's like edgy, but then they don't really explain it and it doesn't really make sense. And then a lot of times that never happens again. Yeah. Because they don't want to deal with the actual ramifications if a character did something like that.
Right. You still have to make a good character. I think that's one of the things that a lot of edgy anti-hero type characters get wrong, is that they think I can just slap the edgy anti-hero label on them and good, I made a character.
Right.
You did make a character, but you didn't make a good character.
Exactly.
You made a lazy character.
Yep.
And you will not find more lazy character types more lazy characters of a type in anime other than the anti-hero.
Like it can be
rampant.
pretty bad.
It's really bad.
But because anti-heroes, right? They're by their very nature a contradiction, right? Or at least they're supposed to be. That's how they started out, right?
Right.
The hero, back when heroes were a lot more like uniform,
Yeah.
and then they do something different, right?
Yep.
And that makes them very enjoyable because you don't know what they're going to do. They're unpredictable. They're more adventurous, right? You want to see what happens next.
Right.
And
that's very desirable to have in a story. There's a lot of stories that have made their entire plot based around having a world full of anti-heroes with one pseudo-uniformed protagonist coming into the mix, and it's just like, yeah, you're not going to last long here. And then we have Game of Thrones.
Right.
And it becomes one of the most popular shows in television ever. So having an anti-hero is a thing that's kind of hot and cool right now.
Uh-huh.
But as we get more of them, we want to remember why the anti-heroes became special. Is that the anti-hero is one that defies the boundaries that regular protagonists had put upon them, and goes, I'm going to be a little bit more unpredictable. I'm going to be a little bit more free.
It is basically the embodiment of the whole idea that me and Caleb harp on so much, of having your characters be walking contradictions.
Yep.
That's why when they're just one or the other, it gets boring. Hence, when there's a lot of anti-heroes and they're just a basic anti-hero, they are incredibly forgettable and incredibly boring.
That's why we've been mentioning contradictions so much, because that's our big thing we have to emphasize here, that if you're ever kind of looking for a proper anti-hero, look for the ones that, yes, they will do the thing that is horrible. Like, they'll do the thing that is morally questionable, like objectionable in like a whole bunch of ways, and then they also like saved that town from
when they didn't need to.
Like having the selfishness of, say, someone like I don't know, Jack Sparrow, for instance.
And in the first movie specifically.
But then like going like through very specific, measures to make sure that he saves, certain characters like Elizabeth. You could also have, characters who are even slight ripoffs in a lot of ways of other characters, like Kogami from Psychopaths, who is kind of an edgier, more lazily written Spike Spiegel.
And we pointed out as such, but he's still a good character because they do those things that, they do specific things well, even though he is an edgier Spike Spiegel.
Right, you can still have a derivative character in the anti-hero setup, but as long as they have good contradictions, they'll still come across well because those contradictions in a lot of ways carry them through the very easy pitfalls that anti-heroes tend to fall into. It's kind of like the yo-yo, essentially, where like you'll have them swinging really far to the right on specific areas, but then, once they get into this environment, they swing really far over to this side here.
I almost feel like in order to make a really good anti-hero, you kind of have to have a finger on the pulse of what kind of stories are coming out and what like pop culture and media in general is doing, because that way you can know what is expected of a hero, essentially, and then that way you can do something different. Because nowadays, a hero that actually is very good-natured and like lawful good and everything, and is not lazily lawful good, but
not
actively,
lawful stupid.
But like actively lawful good could almost be considered a form of anti-hero, because that is something that is so rarely done nowadays.
In a lot of ways, we've seen a recent surge. This is nothing new to any of you. Probably like the last 10 years it's been this way. But the smarmy, condescending, cocky, hyper-intelligent bastard that just puts upon everyone their intelligence for the sake of looking cool.
The Sherlock Holmes, the Houses,
there's a whole bunch of characters, the Tony Stark kind of thing like that. That's a very classic example of anti-hero. One of the things of why understanding culture, though, is very important is you could make one of those characters and think, oh, that's great.
So awesome.
It's so awesome. But if you don't know the fact that that's been done to death for the last decade, you're like, oh, you're going to look like a dime a dozen there. So having the contradictions are important. But I would say the thing that can help you stand out even when you unknowingly, because of culture, seem like you're ripping off something else, is you didn't emphasize your contradictions enough.
Right.
So emphasize them like way more than anything else. I don't care about their backstory that has all this edgy stuff to it. Emphasize this contradiction. That's why I think actually Firefly as a show did so well, because its whole group on the ship in some ways were a group of anti-heroes.
Yeah, and
they all had different magnitudes of anti-heroism.
Right.
Like Jane was pretty far onto the like darker side of the anti-hero, but Wash was really far onto the lighter side of the anti-hero spectrum.
And then Simon was kind of the lawful stupid a bit.
Right. Yeah. Getting thrown into the mix.
Exactly. And like, okay, the whole idea of anti-heroes and contradictions, right? I feel like the reason that they become so popular, not just the fact that they're doing something different, but it's that they feel much more realistic, because humans have, potential for great compassion and, just awesomeness.
And great selfishness.
Great selfishness, savagery, and all that jazz. So by putting them together, you can make someone that looks more like an actual person, because aren't real people who you want to be rooting for, not characters, even though they're
caricatures.
Yeah. But anyways.
So yeah, that's our talk on anti-heroes, guys. We're going to shift into the Q&A section of this.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm going to mention this here just in case you're not willing to watch the entire discussion. We answer questions from previous podcasts, so leave a question that you'd like to ask us in the not in the description, but in the comments down below.
Yes.
And we will accumulate those and answer them in a future podcast. So yeah, into the questions we go. Lex the Graceful Rival, you always have such awesome questions. This is a betrayal story arcs. What do you think many authors forget about when writing betrayal story arcs? And what do you think can ruin a betrayal story arc or make it feel forced? Go for it.
Okay. So you need to care about both characters in the betrayal.
So yes.
You need to care about the person getting betrayed, but you also need to care about the person that's doing the betraying.
Yes.
Because a betrayal can only happen when you trust the person, right?
Right.
And when you care about the person.
Yeah.
So that way you're like, no, how could you possibly do this?
Right.
And it can kind of be enough to have the main character or the person being betrayed care about the person. But if the audience does not care about the person that's doing the betraying, that probably means you didn't show enough how much the person being betrayed cares about the betrayer.
Right. And I think I think that was perfect.
Betrayer words, but
I think that one way, I don't really have an answer for the first part, but I think one of the ways you can make it feel forced is when a character does something that the previous setup for the character, say the main character is going to get betrayed by the other main character, and the main character is about to get betrayed, does something that's outside of the previously established kind of foundation of that character, just so that the plot can have a betrayal worthy for the other character. You really need to make sure that the grounding of the characters involved in the betrayal is sound. And so wait on the betrayal. You don't have to have it as early as possible. If you have it later into the story, you run the risk of people going, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit with the thing there. But actually, in a lot of ways, by having it be a little bit later than just the immediate beginning, or having it be off screen by like, I was betrayed 2 years ago. Right. That's basically the lazy way of saying, I couldn't come up with a convincing way to make the betrayal feel real.
Exactly.
So that's one of the ways I think betrayals can feel forced, is they don't have the guts to show it with prior context.
One of the other ways you can make a betrayal be really awesome is if you make it so that, one, you understand why the betrayal happened. So have there be stuff that leads up to it, even though you're like, how could you do this, right?
Yeah.
And then two, make it so that it's kind of because of something, some mistake or whatever, that the betrayed person did.
Sure.
Right? And even though you can't agree with the betrayer, you can still see how they got there.
Yeah. Next question is from Summer Looney. Asks, how do you feel about villains who are introduced as the more cliche bad guy thirsting for power, but discovering that this person actually has caused themselves to have a psychotic de-evolution caused by the constant self-reassurance that they are really the good guy? Okay, so to break this down into a little bit more simple speak.
It's the bad guy that thinks they're the good guy.
It's the bad guy that thinks they're a good guy, but they're introduced in such a way that you, as the viewer, are meant to think that they are the I am so evil. Right. Yes, I am so hungry for power. But actually, later in the story, you find out that they had a breakdown that led from them thinking that they are the good guy to this. I really like that setup, but it's hardly, if ever, executed properly. It's extremely difficult.
Because here's the thing. Having there be a point where they realize, oh, okay, I thought I was the good guy, but I guess now I'm the bad guy, that can work and that can be amazing. Yeah. But if you have a villain where they're already introduced as being the cliche villain type, by that point they should be able to realize that they're the bad guy. Right? Otherwise, the whole "I'm a bad guy" and
that's the point.
Be prepared.
They're saying
won't come across as strongly.
Yeah, but they're saying that they lost the belief that they're the good guy. So, see, discovering that the person actually has caused themselves to have a psychotic devolution that was caused by the constant self-reassurance that they are really the good guy. In a lot of ways, I see this as being a very Darth Vader Anakin thing. Because Darth Vader was the cliche villain in a lot of ways. He was a perfect cliche villain in a lot of ways because he didn't monologue about thirsting for power.
Exactly.
He just was this force
he just
of
did things
nature.
And you were terrified.
He just went at you. But when you go back to the prequels, you find out that he did have this thing of, you're the chosen one, you're the chosen one, you're the chosen one. And there was a different sort of psychotic de-evolution, but it's very rarely that the constant reassurance of the character being the good guy is what caused them to fall.
Exactly.
So it's not necessarily in that this concept can't work. It's that I like the idea. It's just very difficult to pull off. I'm just looking at the parameters involved in my head right now, and I'm like, I can't write that.
It's very specific, too.
Yeah.
Because especially if they're initially introduced as the cliche bad guy, then there's this idea that at some point you're going to see that, oh, it wasn't quite that, or it wasn't quite that for them, and I hardly ever am able to believe it when that happens.
Next question is from Lex the Graceful Rival. Hey, how do you handle a story with multiple villains/antagonists? And by that, I don't mean an MHA style where you have multiple villains on the same side, but a story where each antagonist has their own side. Oh, okay.
So like a battle royale, basically.
So, yeah, kind of like a battle royale, kind of like Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah, Game of Thrones is another great example.
Yeah,
intrigue and all that
Game
stuff.
of Thrones is also a great thing of bringing up that you can have multiple antagonists but not have multiple villains. If that makes sense.
Sure.
There's only one villain in Game of Thrones. Spoiler alert, you should know who it is if you're watching it. There's only one real villain. Like, there's a lot of people that are dicks in Game of Thrones, and they're antagonistic towards the more protagonist characters in the story, which become more clear as you get towards the end.
Right.
But one of the best ways to handle it is you put them in really separate places, like Game of Thrones does, so that you don't have to have 7 of them interacting all at once. Yeah. And then you basically have them each be the protagonist of a mini-story.
Ooh. And I think the reason why that works is it basically puts a limiter on them so that they can't immediately take each other out, right?
Right.
Not in some like killing them sense like a battle royale. It could just be in like a social situation or whatever the conflict is based in.
Yeah.
And with something like intrigue, one of the reasons those can work so well is because there's this idea that even though we don't like each other, we can't actively like just slaughter each other in open daylight.
Right, like a battle royale.
Exactly.
Yeah. The follow-up question is, how do you decide how much time you should spend on each one? I think the main thing is that you give them as much time as necessary as you give to the plot line that they're on, meaning that like their motivations are going to dictate how much time you give to them.
Discovery-based storytelling can be amazing for this.
Yeah, you would want to take it really slow in how you'd write this, but in a lot of ways you could just write a bunch of little stories and have them all be written out, and once they start to intersect with each other, you can then use these mini stories that you've written as templates for the overall story that you would write afterwards.
I would also make sure that you introduce them strongly and concisely so that you can use like mystery and or cliches to make it so they think they understand them. That way you don't need to develop them yet. Right. And then you can focus on them one at a time.
I like that. It says, how do you handle villain-on-villain conflict? Yeah, villain-on-villain conflict.
With awesome banter.
Yes. If we're talking about how we prefer it, like I really love...
They need to throw the shade at each other.
Villains that not only, throw the shade at each other, but that they revel in their own competence while respecting the other's competence.
That villainous virtue.
Yeah. So I really enjoy the intrigue, since we're just talking about Game of Thrones, loving it so much. Varys and Baelish.
Yeah.
Anytime they were talking in Game of Thrones, the audience was spellbound because they have this extreme hatred of each other, but also this professional respect.
Exactly.
And it's very villainous virtue.
Because they're not monsters after all. They're not savages.
They all deal with everything through their proxies, so they could never just cut each other's throats out,
exactly.
In open daylight. So I think that's how we prefer to handle it. Oh, another question from Lex the Graceful Rival. In your opinion, what are some good ways to distinguish your story in an overused genre or setting?
That kind of ties into the whole anti-hero thing that we were talking about.
Contradictions, yeah.
Yeah, contradictions and making sure you have a pulse on what is the norm. What's to be expected.
You know when someone's trying to sell you on this fantasy, they're like, it's Lord of the Rings, but... And then they throw this other thing in there that you're like, wait, what?
Huh? Yeah, a lot of times just mixing of the two different things is what can make something so amazing. Take Star Wars, for instance. It's space, but with magic.
Yeah, that's how you do it. CRM GSEC asks, so what are, in your opinion, some animated shows, anime or not, where the voice acting is not only good, but a key element that plays relevant or huge part in said shows? Oh, I have a lot of ones, but you go.
Konosuba.
Konosuba is a great example. Yep.
That,
Yeah, definitely.
What about you?
I was just going to say Avatar: The Last Airbender. They had actual kids play the kid roles.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
I want to tell you guys something. A lot of your favorite anime out there, the protagonists are played by 30-something-year-old women. Yeah. And I'm talking about that generally because these are kid protagonists.
Right, who are 12 or something.
Or supposedly 12. And, yeah.
Right.
It is a huge difference when you hear Aang as a kid voice actor talking about the weight of the world being put upon his shoulders, and you hear the inflections in the voice acting, and you go, this is a kid.
Yeah, right.
Because oftentimes the immersion is completely broken when you hear the 30, 40-year-old just break out a little bit, especially in the high, intense emotional moments. It's really hard to be that good of a voice actor. There's a lot of them that do it very well. I give props to those people. But I think Avatar: The Last Airbender did a good job of having kids and elderly voice actors to where you feel the world of it there. And also I got to give a shout out to the guy that does all the animals and stuff like that in that show.
D.
Bradley Baker. He's a god of voice acting.
Yeah, he's pretty amazing.
He's fantastic.
Bonus round ghost stories.
Oh!
The dub.
Oh! Ghost stories! Please watch it
because that is the entire reason that you watch that show.
Yep. In the dub.
Dub only. Haters, you will be proven wrong.
Right. This is the only show that you only watch in the dub.
Yeah, you
do 0% reason to watch it in the sub.
Yeah.
100%. And anyone that's watched Ghost Stories, you know what we're talking about. Yeah. Next question is from Little Duck. Let's talk heavy topics.
Okay.
When it comes to including the subject of religion as a central theme to a story, how should one go about incorporating it without coming off as offensive or ignorant? Well,
I would say this question is kind of could be used for any kind of the other, situation. Where it's any time that you're basically trying to represent opinions that are basically not your own.
Right.
Any kind of viewpoint that's not your own. Because you have to take care with that, especially when it's something like religion or whatever, where it's something so cherished by the people who have those beliefs or viewpoints.
And you don't even necessarily have to give the full spectrum of it. What you just need to do is make sure that when you're bringing up the subject of it, remember that your whole story should be told through the viewpoint of characters. If the author comes into the story, it's a little bit immersion breaking.
Right.
So the main thing is that just create their characters and create their opinions on the whole thing.
Yep.
It's actually not as heavy of a topic if you're able to distance yourself from the story. So a lot of times in specific stories, you'll see a very specific kind of authorial intent put into when we're coming across certain topics. And that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
I prefer it when the characters have their own kind of say on it, and it's actually really fun when you get two characters that disagree on this whole thing, and the author is basically like playing inside their own mind.
Right. Because they're like
having them come at each other like this. Right. And it's hilarious because you're like, they're doing a good job at this.
Yeah, like both sides. Because, okay.
And that's, let's be real, there's way more than two sides to every argument generally. Especially around something like religion.
One example that I would like to use for this is the idea of the female character. Back when like good female characters, like just good characters that happen to be female, were a lot less common. And especially with like younger writing, for instance. Like anytime you're like if you go into the realm of like fan fiction type stuff, or like the
Are we throwing some shade?
That was good, but it's the idea that sometimes people would be like, well, my female character has this view on feminism, and that's actually just their view as a character because that's the kind of person they are. And it's like, okay, is that really what they think, or is that just, because that's what you think, and for this one female character, you're going to have them think that? Yeah. Same thing with the atheist and versus like, spiritual person, or the spiritual person versus the atheist. Right. And there's the one other person, so they give them that viewpoint that they have of the other, rather than what.
Right. What are some examples of great shows you've seen with religion as one of their central themes? Firefly actually has a priest character in the story who is very much not a good priest. He is not even called a priest. He's called a shepherd in it.
Right.
And you can tell it's loosely based off Christianity. It probably is. Because the story of Firefly has a very blend of Western and actually Chinese in the cultures, just based on the way the world, I guess, developed. But the way that they handle things there is pretty clever. Because in a lot of ways, the shepherd is kind of a hypocrite. Right. But in a lot of ways, he also has some interesting bits of wisdom to say here and there. And you're like, I don't know what to make of this guy. And it's through a well-done three-dimensional character. Yep. That's how I prefer it.
And one of the tough things with something like religion specifically is because there's so many different religions out there, it'll usually be that there will be the one religious character that will be the representation of religion as a whole.
Yeah,
and because of that,
which is extremely unfortunate.
Which is extremely unfortunate because that causes there to be this thing. There's this disconnect where you'll be like, okay, I don't like how they portrayed that religious character because maybe the flaws and stuff that they had are flaws that I don't want to see as a representation of a religious character or something, right?
Right. Or it's just something that you'll find is being overdone because they're only trying to get at, say, like a couple popular religions,
like the Catholic Church or something. That's the common one usually.
Right. They're one of the bigger ones, you know, out there, so it's easier to.
This is not a show, but it is a book, Mistborn. There's a character in there that is actually basically a religious scholar.
Okay.
So he talks about different religions quite a bit. And, of course, they're all made-up religions, so that makes it really fun.
Yeah. I like the way that the religions and things are handled a little bit in Game of Thrones' books, not as much the shows. But, good stuff in there. Tanya the Future Writer. Boldly proclaiming. Yeah. I like the name. How would you redeem a villain without them dying as a sacrifice? There's a million ways to do this.
Yeah, so many. So judging by this question, I'm guessing that it is some sort of action story.
Right.
And the real question here, right, is redeeming a villain. So there's redeeming an antagonist and redeeming a villain.
Very different.
So there's villain, when I think of like a true villain, like on the truest end of the spectrum, you've got the Cthulhu dark force of nature that wants to consume everything.
That's not even a character.
No, I know.
That's an entity.
No, I know. And you never actually. That's the asymptotic point. That things can get close to.
We can just look at characters like Darth Vader, for instance.
Sure, Darth Vader.
That's a great example. You built into the mechanics of the story a way in which the characters can actually feel a pull towards the compassionate, moral, good side, so to speak. And that is a way that they brought him to be redeemed. And it wasn't him dying that redeemed him.
Right.
It was his act of self-sacrifice. So
exactly,
it didn't matter whether or not Vader died doing the thing at the end of Return of the Jedi. I don't want to
usually,
spoil anything for you guys.
What usually is the reason why people use dying as a way to, be a sacrifice or a way to redeem them as a character.
You're about to spit truth. I know what you're going to say.
Because the idea of redemption is actually kind of scary.
Yep.
Because it's the idea that someone that did horrible things, that they can turn over a new leaf. And a lot of times we're not actually willing to buy that.
Right.
And because of that, a lot of times when characters actually do stuff that is really bad, it's easier for the audience to just see them get killed off. That way they can show their turning over of the new leaf, but we never actually have to see if rubber meets the road, and we never have to have the characters basically come to grips with the fact that now this person has turned over a new leaf, even though maybe they slaughtered their family or whatever.
Well done.
Right?
Yeah. This is the same thing with happily ever after stories. It's basically the idea of, oh, we kissed and now we're going to be together forever.
Exactly.
No story. Story ends.
Yep.
We don't want to deal with the actual stuff of what makes love happen. So in this, I would say I'm 100% with Jacob, is that you basically, you redeem them and you give them a redemption story.
Right. Show the journey after the point where they decide they want to redeem themselves. Now, okay, this isn't exactly a villain example, but with the movie A Silent Voice, the main character for the first 20 minutes of the movie is way antagonist, like almost villain protagonist, as much as a 12-year-old can be, right?
Yeah.
And then they spend the whole rest of the movie talking about his redemption story. There's the part where he's a villain, and then there's the part where he's working on the redemption and going on that journey. Right. The journey afterwards is much bigger than the part where he's being the asshole.
Yeah. So. All right. Next question's from Antonio Roja Cortez. What is your favorite underworld in a show or movie?
Roanapur from Black Lagoon.
Wait, so when they say underworld,
like criminal underworld.
Criminal underworld. Okay, I was thinking literal fantasy underworld. Oh. I was like, that's really tough. And you're like, Roanapur. I'm like, Nani? What? I mean, it is kind of hell, but if I had to go with criminal underworld, I really liked everything about Nar Shaddaa in Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
So
you got to go into the games.
You got to go into the games. You got to go into the EU. You got to go into a whole bunch of other stuff. But there's this really disgusting feeling about Nar Shaddaa where you feel like it's a dark take on Coruscant. Coruscant is a planet in the game in the stories of Star Wars that has a very tiered society. You go lower and it becomes a literal underworld.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Nar Shaddaa,
that's just where it is.
It's
everywhere.
Just everywhere. Yeah. The whole thing is that.
This is the place for that, where everyone's just like, oh yeah, kill someone in the street, no big deal, just throw them in a pit.
It is basically the worst bits of if you took Las Vegas, if you took the kind of what is that? The opulent, but just
take the idea of what Ben Kenobi said in A New Hope, where he said, "You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy." We only got the cantina scene really from that. But imagine if you had an entire moon based dedicated
around
to that, where it really was.
And it did have the whole feeling of everything is a very tiered society, but every tier of it is just a different type of scum and villainy.
Yep.
And that is one of my favorite underworlds because you go to explore all of it. The upper parts, the lower parts, and everything in between. Yeah, it's pretty good.
It's pretty great.
Pretty good.
It's basically the Star Wars Roanapur.
Yeah. Vanessa Kovacs says, what do you think about a story where the hero protagonist development is about him becoming a villain antagonist at the end of the story?
That can be
that's
tough to
Death
do.
Note.
Sure.
But the thing is that Death Note, you kind of knew it was all going bad.
The better examples are things like Breaking Bad. Oh, like things like that, where you don't necessarily know that because the reason why things like Death Note I feel like get a bad rep for that is because you know what's going to happen, right? And by the end you're just like, this guy's a dick.
Spoiler alert: Breaking Bad, by the way.
Right.
Breaking Bad is a great example of that. I think that about a nebulous, non-specific story that has this, I think that I need to have full belief in them as a hero protagonist first, though.
Yeah, exactly. That way you can have the conflict and make them start making those little mistakes or those little decisions that are taking them.
Right. So in a lot of ways, the sucky thing about this story is that it has to take a long time.
Yeah.
It's a very slow burn of a story. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes that's not easy to do, because if they are compelling as a hero protagonist for a long time, finding the points at which to slowly bridge the gap between hero protagonist to villain antagonist is difficult. That's why a lot of ways Breaking Bad is considered by many to be another one of the greatest shows of our era. Like, it's just that good.
Because if you have an abrupt transition, you will make your audience very angry.
Yeah. Next question is from Daw. How do I know if my story is too ambitious? Well,
if you have to ask this question, it's probably too ambitious.
Yeah, I feel like even just how do I know? Well,
it probably is.
It probably
Simplicity is so amazing.
Yeah. Like, just go for simplicity, man. And follow up with this question with another question about more specific stuff that you would like to know about. Yeah. I feel like this is a little bit too nebulous of a question. Moonstone Pearl asks, what do you think makes something you're watching or reading truly scary? And what kinds of things scare you the most in entertainment? Things besides bugs for Caleb. I have a lot of things I'm scared of besides bugs, but I just don't talk about them as much. It's something I'm watching, though, or reading.
Okay, so the
really
reason
tough.
the reason we get scared is because we usually fear for our safety, right? Or in the case of stories, the safety of the characters. So having something where you don't actually know whether they're going to be okay or not can do a lot of that, but also making you basically think that something's around the corner, even if it's not necessarily. Monster is a great example with the sound and the shots and all of that stuff.
The sound editing, sound design in general in Monster is incredible. Because see, the thing is I don't think that fear is something actually where you're thinking about your own safety. Fear is a much more physical thing, I think, where you're just getting your amygdala triggered and you're just like, so there's a very chemical kind of thing going on here with fear. So I think maybe what it could be is that in a lot of ways, you break down fear, false evidence appearing real, is you get into making people be uncertain of the future.
Right. We don't like what we don't understand.
Right. And when you think about scary versus just fear, because like in Lost, there's all these mystery things, and I was getting a little bit of fear, but I was never really scared. I think that you need to find a way to blend that, the uncertainty of the future, with almost in a couple ways some of the stinger aspects of a horror thing, with having a build up, stinger, build up, stinger, go with that a little bit. So it's not actually what is in the content.
Right. It's how you portray
it. So I think the build up in a lot of ways is more important than, say, the stinger in a horror setting. And also the false evidence appearing real, the uncertainty of what comes up next, combined with build up, is kind of the way that Monster, just having the sound design in addition to all of that, makes it so it's actually scary at certain points.
This is a heavy question. Steel Ram, how do you cope with having made a big mistake that you can't resolve and that will have a big impact on your life?
Well, okay. That's actually not an easy question to ask. That's a really tough question to ask. Okay, so we've all made mistakes,
right?
But the thing about the word big is that generally it gets bigger the more you focus on it.
Yes.
So I think that the really tricky thing is that you're going to make mistakes, and I like that you use the word big twice, because I can extend this principle to both aspects of the impact and the mistake itself.
Right.
So let's say you do something really stupid. I don't know.
It doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter what it is. I think once it's done, you're going to have some regret. The point is that if you focus on the regret and you focus on all the things that encompass the mistake itself, it will have a bigger impact on it,
right,
on your life in general. So focus on it less. Remain in the present. I think that remaining in the present is one of the wisest things that anyone has ever said to me, ever. I am way too much of a non-present kind of thinker.
Either worrying about the future,
or beating myself up about the past.
Yeah.
Both of those are idiotic and stupid. Like, I am sorry, there are probably a lot of people that think that it's good to have maybe a healthy dose of one of the other.
But usually that's not the ditch we're near.
No. We're talking about the kind of thing where you're like actively having panic attacks because you're scared of what could go wrong in the future.
Right.
Or you're crippled with like depression because of
how could I have been so stupid at that one time?
Things and stuff.
That's why I think
so. It's all about focus. Really.
That's why I think apologizing is such a big deal whenever you make mistakes with regards to like people, because you're basically like, because if you think about it, like let's say you do something that like weakens your connection with somebody. Apologizing quickly is great because then you can just be like, okay, that's over, and I'm sorry, and I really am sorry, and then you sort of move on from that. Your mind is no longer thinking, constantly dwelling on it, and then you can hopefully
I still think though the act is not important. The individual act, it is really all about your focus.
That's more of just something that maybe might help you in certain situations.
Yeah, I almost want to throw that whole idea out the thing there. I'm glad that you brought that up, but for me it just has almost no value. It's really about the focus, because right now this person is asking about how do you cope. This is not talking about a person who is trying to avoid it or resolve it in some way. It's just the mistake has happened.
Right.
Something can't be resolved.
Yeah.
And how do I keep it from having a big impact on my life?
You can't change what you did, but you can change what you do right now.
Right. And that's my point. Is stay present.
Yep.
And focus on the right things. So generally it has to be a positive thing that will and in a lot of ways it's something silly and small. So I can't tell you what that would be, but find that thing. Next question is from Christian Magrum.
Jacob, I have a fair portion of my story written. Did you do most of the editing yourself, or have other people do a portion of it? I do some of it myself, but the majority of it is done by other people, because you will be too close to your story. You won't be able to know really what needs to be done.
And have a dialogue with them as you're editing, of course, but I would
get other people that can do it and get people that know what they're doing.
And QUXXN asks, if there was a character from Haikyuu that you could hang out with, who would that be and what would you do?
You first.
Well, okay. So, the thing is there's the character who I would want to hang out with because I think they would be inspiring and helpful for me. And as the character I just have the most fun with. I really would enjoy hanging out with Nishinoya. Nishinoya and I would have so much fun just doing any kind of sport thing.
You'd be I have to teach you Frisbee.
Yeah. I'll make you into the best Frisbee player ever. And the thing is, all the Haikyuu characters are younger than me. So I'd be like, I'm going to train you. You'll be my Jedi apprentice. And they're like, that's so awesome. And maybe they'd be like, nah, Frisbee's lame. That's not even a real sport. And I'd be like, okay, But if this is an ideal situation, that would be something I would do. But if I wanted to hang out with someone that I could just get a lot of, value from and stuff, and we could have a really good, just simple kind of relationship and things, I would really like to hang out with Kyoko. I think.
Okay, I was gonna say, all right. I was like, wait, is it? I think he's building up to that. Yeah, mine. Yeah. I was gonna say basically exactly the same thing. I'm like, okay, in all seriousness, Nishinoya, but you have to say Kyoko. Come on.
Right, and the main thing is that she's older than Yachi, so she's a little bit more just in general, probably be a better conversationalist.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Asterisk.
5 asterisks.
Yeah, 5 asterisks.
I've noticed that you make specialized thumbnails for each episode for some of the shows you're reacting to, and that you add outro music as well. Will you do it for all of the shows, or is it only for some specific ones? Well, special thing about that.
Yep.
We don't do the outro music.
Mm-hmm. We have an awesome editor for the videos that have outro music.
And he does those.
Yes.
Rop is awesome. He does MHA, Haikyuu, and JoJo's. Rob. That's his thing.
Yep.
The thumbnails are done by whoever's doing the editing of that.
Right.
So Rop does the thumbnails for those. I do the thumbnails for the shows that I edit, like
Megalobox,
and Your Line April.
Yep.
Berserk. But you do the thumbnails for Monster,
Hunter Hunter, Place Within the Universe.
Yep.
We divide everything up, but the music is from Rob. He is amazing.
Yeah. So we will not probably be doing that for all of our shows unless we eventually have someone else doing all the editing for us.
Or we
which would be awesome. We really do need editors.
Yeah, we do need more editors.
So,
true.
Yeah.
Business
inquiries with their email address. Go check that out, please. I would really like them. It'd help us get the load off of our backs. Yeah, that would be really awesome. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, leave your questions in the comments below. We'll see you in future podcasts to answer them. But until then, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all next time.